Hello, ladies, and welcome to the Beauty Shaman. So, today we are doing part two in a four-part series about your genetics, discovering and working with your own genetic code with Mary Smith, a certified functional medicine health coach and genetic consultant at thirdacthealth.com. Thanks for joining me, Mary.
Thank you for having me, Suzanne.
Okay, so in part two today of this discussion around your genes, your gene pool, and how your genes express themselves and genetic testing. So let's go into in this one about how to monitor how your genes express themselves and manifest. So we kind of touched on that in the first one. So we're going to touch on this, and it seems a little bit out there, for people like me who are like I'm a creative. I'm like, what did you just say? So let's kind of narrow this down. Not narrow it, but not
Yeah,
dumb it down either, but make it really
yeah.
practical. What do you mean by that?
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to use you as an example since you're creative. Okay, so in with people that are creative, they don't just create out of a vacuum. They create with things. Okay, so an artist creates with a canvas, with paints. Okay, a sculptor creates with objects that they put together. An author creates with words. So when we are creating a life, okay, or when life is being created, it's no different. It literally is the same thing. But life is created using protein, building blocks, amino acids. And what decides what amino acids get put together and what is created are our genes. So there literally are the instructions. The same way that a creative, when an author is writing a book, they'll do an outline, they'll decide the characters, they'll determine what the plot is. It's literally what our bodies are doing. Our genetics are making those choices for us. So literally, there's no difference between our genetic blueprint and the outline that an author uses when they're getting ready to write a book, the idea in an artist's mind when they're getting ready to paint a picture. It's the same process. It's a creative process. It starts at the moment of conception for humans, and a unique genetic code is formed by the combining of half the genetics of the mother and half the genetics of the father, and they combine together to make the double helix strand that becomes that individual's DNA.
So how much control do we have over this? I mean, some of this
Yeah.
to me, it feels very exciting. Like, okay, we've got this genetic um, kind of pool that we're dealing with, but how much of it do you have control with as you go through your life? Like, say I have a genetic disposition towards diabetes. My father has diabetes. My mother has diabetes. That's a little bit ancestral. We're going to get that into another show, but we kind of got to touch on this because we're
Yeah.
talking about creating your own wellness. So how much control do we have? How much is completely out of our control?
Okay, that's a really good question. And again, let's use you as an example because it's a really good example. Okay, so there's a genetic predisposition. It shows up in your family, but what we know scientifically that causes diabetes is an inflammatory process. So what's causing the inflammation? Now, there's a lot of things that cause inflammation in our bodies. Sometimes it's a low-grade infection that we don't even know we have. Epstein-Barr virus. If you had mononucleosis when you were a teenager, you got Epstein-Barr virus in your body. That can literally be sitting there as a low-grade infection you carry with you your whole life that causes an inflammatory response in your body. You're eating foods that you're sensitive to. And while we're on that, let's talk about it because the whole gluten, no gluten, kind of craze in the world right now. Well, the reason that became such an issue is because through science, we have modified the actual genetics of the wheat through hybridization. So the protein that is actually in the wheat, our body doesn't even recognize anymore. So what's an allergic response? What's inflammation? When we are exposed to something that is foreign to us, our body sends out a cascade of substances to protect our body from that foreign invader, whether that's a virus, a bacteria, or, by the way, a foreign protein like wheat, gluten in today's wheat. So what happens is that That process is inflammation. That's what it is. Now, if we eat the wheat, it ends up in our gut. That inflammatory process is happening in our intestinal system, and the pancreas is part of the intestinal system. So, what we know now is that a lot of diabetes is the direct result of gut inflammation or inflammation of the entire gut system that is caused by food sensitivities that go undiagnosed and unrecognized for a lifetime. So, Suzanne, you can avoid it. And here's how you do it. No, number one, get yourself some food sensitivity testing and find out what you're sensitive to, right? Pay attention. How does your body feel after you eat certain kinds of foods? Do you get a stomach ache? Does your energy go low? Okay, there's a lot of ways that we can address this. And by the way, by looking within the genetics, there's a whole family of genes that actually control that inflammatory response. So when we're looking at those genetics, I always tell people it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Those genes either work too slow, work too fast, or they're just right. And if those genes are working too fast, they're overreacting to things that our body sees as foreign. And so we end up with a lot of inflammation and inflammatory diseases. So we can pull it all together.
Interesting. And I think, a lot of your work is around the part three of life. So it's as people
Yes.
are getting older and we're starting to have more issues,
Yes.
or that's really it's showing up even in a more dramatic fashion. Okay, take
Yes.
for example. And so changing your diet and really like looking back at, I guess what I'm trying to say is when I look back at my own life, I can say there were times where I felt really, really awesome. And there were times when there was just like this consistent downer of health. And looking back and really starting to examine that, I think is
Yes.
your work is because you're going, okay, what exactly was that? And really getting down to the nitty gritty of it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and getting down to the nitty gritty, and it's a form of self knowledge, self understanding is really what it comes to.
Right, and it takes a fair amount of effort. I think people have to. I mean, for me, when I eat gluten, I do feel that downer. What you explained about gluten was great. You explained it perfectly. Of I start to sometimes I can get headaches. I swell for sure when I don't eat gluten. My body doesn't swell as much. It's kind of crazy, and it's hard to completely avoid it sometimes because it's kind of everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's pretty ubiquitous. Yeah.
It's pretty ubiquitous. It's very difficult to nail it down, but I notice I feel so much better. So when you're dealing with people, when you're working with people and how their genes affect their health,
Hmm.
how do you maybe just explain a little bit. We'll go a little bit more into that. We went into that a little bit in the first show, but let's go into that a little bit more of how you would discover that. Okay, maybe we should use gluten intolerance or diabetes, one of those as an
Yep.
example of how you would kind of examine that.
Okay, so gluten intolerance is a really easy one. There are specific genes called the HLA genes that predispose people to developing inflammatory responses to foreign proteins, specifically gluten. Also, there are genes there, and these are all part of that immune response process, but that also predispose people to develop toxins within their body when they're exposed to mold. So
Wow.
only about 25%, yep, 25% of the population has those specific genes. So you can have a family of 5 people living in a house and there's a water leak and they don't realize it, but they now have water behind a wall and over a period of 6 months, black mold forms and one of the kids gets just sick. And it can't figure out what's going on because everybody else in the family's fine. Well, that one child has that gene, has that series of genes that predisposes him to making mycotoxins from the mold as a body defense. But literally, the toxins are made by his own body and make him sick. So by understanding this, this is why some people can smoke their whole life and never get lung cancer, right? And then you've got this 55-year-old woman who develops lung cancer and has never smoked a day in her life, right? There are things that predispose us to certain conditions. And by understanding the predisposition and then understanding the lifestyle choices that we are making, we can avoid a lot of these things. So, go back to gluten and the gluten sensitivity. There are genes that predispose people to develop celiac disease. If you are one of those people and you eat gluten, you're going to probably develop problems down the road.
Interesting. And I think this is so fascinating because really it's a very individualized
Very.
to health,
Hmm.
right? And it isn't
Yeah.
like I think we get in the news and media, we get this don't eat eggs, they're terrible, or we get
Right.
odd things. And now I'm super suspicious of that. And I'm also very suspicious of, take this one vitamin, it'll cure everything sort of stuff. BS. I'm going to say the word. Uh,
Yeah.
because it's not that. Like it really is an individual. It's such an individual. Health is so individual.
It really truly is. And, a lot of my clients, when they come to me, they'll say, I've tried everything. I take 25 supplements a day. This, but nothing seems to be really making a difference. And the reason that nothing's making a difference is because they haven't found, number one, what's causing the problem in the first place. But number two, they haven't married the cause to maybe the genetic predisposition or how their genes are playing a part in all of this. And then taking the targeted nutrient therapy that is going to support those genes behaving better, which is going to help eliminate the symptom. So I call it the three-legged stool. You can't do one without the other two and expect to get any good results, right? If you really do want to change the way your body functions, you have to first understand what your kind of default programming is. Number two, look at what is actually happening biochemically in your body, and then understanding the changes that you need to make in order to get the programming to change so that what is happening in your body can be different.
I want to just bring up one example and then we're going to close out. But I have a friend who has, seen a naturopath. She's gone on all kinds of vitamins, still felt exhausted all the time. Went and had this done, what you do, something similar to what you do. And basically, what came up is she can't absorb vitamin B.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
she went, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. She's so depleted in vitamin B, she's starting to get all these other health problems,
Yes.
right? Well,
Yeah.
associated with that.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, look, this is what we have to do in order to help your body to start absorbing vitamin B. And so they
Mhm.
started a whole process of helping her. And she's slowly but surely starting to, and this is a woman who's 40 years old,
Yeah. Yeah.
like always had good health and just has slowly just felt so exhausted and can't seem to snap out of it. And
Mhm.
because of this genetic, and when she looked back at her family's genetics, her whole family is littered with this inability
Yeah.
to absorb vitamin B. But who knew, right? Who knew?
Right.
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 They have the manifestations of all the illnesses from that. But she's
Yes.
feeling it now at age 40, thank God, right?
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. Good for her that she was able to discover that, because that probably is going to turn her life around permanently. And
Right.
instead of going down that path that just is a downward spiral, she's kind of reverse course. So good.
And what's encouraging is we can do that, and we can
Yes.
kind of kind of configure or realign. And we're going to talk about alignment and dissonance and all that in the next show. But I think what a gift, right? To be able to look at all of this and know and make the changes. I mean, it's just
Yes.
like a gift of health and vibrancy. And I look at you, and you're a vibrant woman, and I think, well, of course, because you're really tuning into your body.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was my first client.
Yeah. Aren't we all, right? My first client with all this stuff because I tried loads of stuff. We both know that. Well, this is great, and thank you so much for talking about your genes. In the next video, we're going to talk about how your thoughts affect your gene pool. So this is a very exciting.
Okay.
So everyone, please stay tuned for our next video, and do tune into the entire 4-part series. But thank you so much for joining me today, Mary.
Thank you.
And if
Appreciate
you
it.
want more information on Mary, please go to her website at hold on, I got to bring the website up here. There we go. 3D thirdacthealth.com.
Mhm.
And this is Mary Smith joining me today to talk about genetics and health. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Suzanne.